everybody to the Lents Neighborhood Quality Association meeting for April 11th. My name is Todd Littlefield, and I'm happy to welcome the 6 candidates running for District 1 City Council. Beginning January 1st, the City of Portland will have a new form of government. The city will be divided into 4 districts. Lents is District 1. Woo. Each candidate will have 2.5 minutes to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Noah. Sorry.
Hello, I'm Noah Ernst. I'm the only one who didn't get a picture on the thing, so look closely. So that you remember. Oh, you didn't either? There's 2 of us. I'm running for city council because I'm really excited about the change in the city government that he mentioned, and I'm excited to listen to and advocate for and represent the citizens of East Portland, and hopefully finally their voice will be able to be heard in city government. A little bit about myself. I'm an attorney. I'm a superintendent at Radio Cab Company. I've lived in Portland for 20 years, always on the east side, although not always in District 1. And I hope to bring a broad base of life experience and professional experience and those sorts of things to city government. And my goal is to bring rational, outcome-based focus to city policy so that we can look at what we do, assess whether it's working, and not be afraid to change our minds and try something else if what we're doing doesn't currently work. And I think that's been lacking from a lot of our city government for several years now. So, thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Terrence?
I don't know what I'm supposed to say after Noah does that. So how y'all doing? My name is Terrence Hayes. I love this community. I bought my home here. I'm raising my family here. I know that we need to be a clean, safe, and affordable community. We need City Hall to invest in the East. They haven't done it. They're going to act like they're going to do it. And if we don't get the right people in office, we won't get streets. We won't get lights. We won't challenge some of the stuff Peabody's done that don't make our commutes better and actually make it worse, right? So I want to be a bridge builder. I've spent the last few years working with PPB to help create a narrative that actually build healthy relationships in Black and brown communities. We've not focused on the narrative, the negative narratives, but we put the energy into building coalition and to build accountability groups that actually work with our police officers and get real longevity and relationships that can actually impact our community. We can be better. We can be amazing, and we can do that together. We're not going to stay in lies, and we're not going to let people leverage pain anymore to determine the future of our community. And I'm going to be a part of that. Thank y'all.
I need to stop going after Terrence. My name is Steph Routh. I am also running for Portland City Council District 1, so apparently I'm in the right place. I am a lentil. Hello, fellow lentils. I actually grew up in Park Rose. I was a toddler during, yes, Park Rose love, go Broncos. I was a toddler during annexation, so if you want to get my mom going on a tear, you mention the word sewers. And you just sit back for about 20 minutes. I live in Lents. I've lived in East Portland the majority of my life, the vast majority of my life. It is the home of my heart. I love it. I sometimes get teary-eyed, and when I saw the districts being drawn and realized that on day 1 of the new administration, East Portland will have more representation on that day than in the cumulative history of Portland City Council, that seems like a pretty special thing. And I want to be a part of it. And I am very excited for a number of reasons, including, I think we've had a lot of Portland Nice, where we talk around the edges of what we actually need to be talking about. And I'm really excited to bring East Portland kind. The kind that's like, we love you, and that you have a lot of schmutz in your teeth. And we've got a lot to go get. We have a lot of challenges, and we can get them, and we can get them together. So thank you very much for being here. You could be many places, and you're here. So cheers.
Hi, good evening. My name is Timur, and I'm proud to be running for Portland City Council District 1. A little bit about me. I graduated from Lewis and Clark Law School and had the privilege of working in city government for about 6 years with groups like East Portland in Motion, East Portland Action Plan, leveraging large multi-million-dollar budgets to meet the needs of community. A little bit more about myself. I'm a parent of 3 kids and on the David Douglas Dad's Club and coach for youth soccer. And some of the reasons I ran is, not everyone has the ability to spend 15 months of their life running for public office, and if they lose, to have that not feel like a waste of time. And so one of the special skills I have is I'm able to align my life to run for public office, and I believe by doing so we are giving voters more choice. As you all know, when you rank your ballot, you can have 6 choices to rank. And then the other reason is because I felt that there wouldn't be 3 candidates that represent my values in terms of being pro-housing, pro-Portland Street response, and pro walking, biking, and transit investments as well. So that's a little bit about myself, and I will pause there and pass it on.
Thank you. So I'm Deian Salazar, and I'm the most unique candidate in this race since I see you guys. I'm 23 years old, and I have not just a unique life story, but a unique perspective, unique skill set. So I was actually not born in Portland. I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah. My dad was a half-Jewish veteran who died in Afghanistan. And so I moved around from a few places until I moved here when I was 11, which was almost 13 years, about 13 years ago now, wow. And then soon after that, I had to go in the foster care system because my mother had a violent partner of her own. In fact, she herself had to go into a foster home herself when she was young because her mother wasn't able to take care of her. And so after I graduated high school and stuff like that, I got involved in public service, where I became known for being a maverick and for being blunt and speaking the truth. And I think we need a lot more of that, and we also need people to build coalitions. I have a successful track record of that. I've held government officials accountable, including Representative Diego Hernandez of District 47 for his horrible actions, as well as I was also the only one to really try to submit a resolution to hold Shamia Fagan accountable, who I liked, so that was not an easy decision. And in addition to that, I've also worked on the Oregon Autism Commission as a social services co-chair. Through that, I know that the current voluntary model and the current system that we have isn't working. It's leaving so many people behind. I could tell you so much about how we manage stabilization and crisis units and how that's failing people with autism. I also work on the Portland Children's Levy, the Community Advisory Council. I'm laser focused on ensuring that people are able to get good education, because education is often the root of opportunity here in America in the current system. And so we need to really leverage that in order to get people good jobs, which is one of my core tenets of my platform. And I also am laser focused on public safety, because here's what we need to look at. So public safety and the economy and everything, including racial justice, is all interconnected. Every system and every state in history has had a police force. So we can't just defund them, we can't abolish them. What we need to do is to be working with them, doing what reforms we can, and ensuring that everybody has a city that is safe for them. When we do that, we'll be able to create the city of the new millennium. Thank you, and I'm excited to talk to you guys more over the course of this forum.
Hi, I'm Thomas Shervey, lifelong Portlander. I've lived east of 82nd my entire life. I went to Madison High School. It's now McDaniels High School. I went to Portland State University, where I studied political science and social science at large. I worked at the Gateway Fred Meyer for 10 years, and now I work for the Multnomah County Department of Community Justice in parole and probation. Why I'm running is because I have seen, and as everyone else has pointed out, the East Side looked over time and time again. We haven't had any representation. We haven't had anyone really run with our interests at heart. And I'm just a guy. That's pretty much it. You know, I worked at Fred Meyer for most of my adult career. However, I want to be your voice, basically. You have a lot of people running that have really good ideas. I want your ideas to get up there. I'm a dad of 2. I've decided to build my life in, I always want to say Hazelbrook, but it's Hazelwood. That is where I am raising my kids. That's where I bought my home, and that is where I want to have the most impact. But East Portland at large, Outer East Portland at large. So my main goals are, homelessness. the drug epidemic and mental health crises. And I think those are all so interwoven that that's just one big issue. If I could pick one thing on day one to put into policy, I would fully fund Portland Street Response and move it out of the Fire Bureau, have it as its own entity, because I feel like that would alleviate so much pressure on all the other departments and help alleviate those issues. Other than that, yeah, I look forward to talking with all of you some more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. You guys have all written down your priorities for what you want to hope to accomplish, your goals. You're going to have 3 minutes to tell us about those. Terrence, you're up.
No, we switched it up, huh? Yeah, good. I'm gonna just step by them because I feel like as bad as my spelling might be, I can read them off and go. So I'll talk about clean, safe, and affordable. I feel like we all know, we can see with our eyes, that our community is not given the same level of love and tenderness when it comes to cleaning as Northwest, Northeast, downtown Portland. All those areas need to be taken care of, but we deserve it too. So I own a company that is a graffiti removal, pressure washing company. I have contracts with the city, and they call me out, and they rarely, if ever, call me out to East Portland. So I know they don't invest in us. I know I would be free to say it doesn't seem like they care much about us. So when you look at encampments, when you look at graffiti, when you look at trash, look at everything we're going through, they have no idea how to approach our community with care and love, but also get it clean and safe for everybody. So I'll shift to safe while we're talking about safety. Again, I think, as Salazar said, he is very unique. But I think when it comes to public safety, I am a formerly incarcerated person. I spent 13 years of my life for a crime I committed, and I was held accountable for that. I never made an excuse for it. I buckled down, I educated myself, I got a trade, I worked my tail off, and then when I got home, I had a job in 3 days, and my wife made sure I kept working my tail off to provide. So I've been a champion for restorative justice, criminal justice reform, building bridges between our community and policing. And I agree that we need to have police in our community, and we need to invest in police officers who want to do the right thing. When I talk to officers, they are not afraid of accountability. They worry about narratives taken away from true accountability and creating political nonsense that keep us from doing the right things, right? I lost a cousin by police violence, but I stand every day with police officers because I also know that they're serving in our community. I did not let my pain become a reason to cause chaos. I let it be a motivator to build healthy relationships so that we can truly have a safe and reasonable community. I sit on the community oversight group that focuses on, we oversee the FIT team, which is a focus intervention team. I'm the chair of that. So I kind of got a little ways to yell at police officers if I need to, but because I work with those men and women every day, I'm able to help impact policy and procedures that work to keep officers safe and communities safe. We are not, I will never be screaming anti-police things because I believe that those men and those women serve our community. So I believe in working together and building true public safety and relationships, you guys. That's how we'll do it. We have to invest in alternative forms of public safety, community-based organizations. We talk about Portland Street Response. We have to make sure we're looking at things like that and that they're coming out and playing out in the most healthiest ways in our community and that we're investing in them and we're supporting them in the same way. We have an amazing set of community-based orgs that are doing their part in reducing gun violence in our community. We're down 20% year over year, 33% in the Black community, and that is through the ceasefire model and Portland police buying into a model that is community and policing. You'll see me play that out every day because I work in that space and it's what I do. And then affordability. I think we need to treat our small businesses well. I think we need to make sure that in East Portland that we're getting folks into the community that feel safe going out and enjoying themselves, that feel safe doing that. So anyway, my time's up, but I'm telling y'all, we got to get the trades back in. We got to get young people to buy into it. Thank you.
I know, no, and I'll just say, this is, I'm over here. I don't even know where I'm going. And this is what is amazing, the fact that East Portland gets 3 people, because I think that together we have complements of portfolios. So, like, I would be deferring to Terrence. Everything on community safety, yes, let us go there. For me, I have the honor of serving. I'll start with shelter to housing, and I have the honor of serving on Portland's Planning Commission. So we look at a lot at land use and affordable housing, and how are we getting more housing. We do not have housing at any price point that we need in our communities, and we also need shelter. One of the projects and one of the reasons that I was really excited to run, that was a decision point. We had, there was this project called the Shelter to Housing Continuum Project. Just like, how do we expand the toolkit of what different shelters need to be in order to support folks getting out of houselessness into temporary shelter, so that we can get them into a continuum of affordable, deeply affordable housing. And then also, how do we expand what affordable housing can mean? We did that Shelter to Housing Continuum project. I think it was a wonderful project in a lot of ways. It passed unanimously through City Council. And then nothing happened with it. So I was like, if the difference is political will is something I can easily conjure. And so that is one thing that I feel deeply about. I think if anyone has tried to get a permit, recently, I've spent a lot of time talking about permits. So that is something that I can bring to the conversation with Terrence on community safety. So I'll just swing down also to better, more responsive government. I have a long history, couple of decades as the first executive director of Oregon Walks, which is our statewide walking advocacy organization. I believe walkability is that elegant solution that we do not have enough of in Portland, or in East Portland, and that is safe routes to school. It is aging in community because our communities are aging, and we need to have connective tissue of walkability and rollability. It's safe routes to school. It's small business development. We have an opportunity in the next few years to really be building some small business districts based on something that's super wonky, and I'll just pull it up, but tax increment financing. I just said that in a speech. But looking at what those small business districts can look like, and that also redounds, as Terrence was saying, to what the broad spectrum of community safety, including eyes on the street and connections. And coalition, all that. Okay, fine. All right.
Who's next? You two?
Oh, wait.
I'm gonna move.
Did he call you Timur?
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
I'm Timur, and I'll just highlight some of my priorities. So first is housing, and as a millennial, someone who's under age 35, our generation has had significant challenges accessing housing in virtually every city in America, and so this is something that I feel is deeply personal, and I would say no level of government is more equipped to address housing affordability than local government, and that's things like legalizing middle housing, duplexes, triplexes, setbacks, zoning, height limits, and things like that. I'm proud to have been a supporter of the Portland Inner East Side for All by Portland Neighbors Welcome, and what that does is it increases density between 12th and 60th, Fremont and Powell, so Inner East Side, and by doing that in areas where it has low displacement risk, high tree canopy, and great walking and biking options, that's able to alleviate some of the challenges. So East Portland has high displacement risk, and if someone's moving here because they're priced out of Inner Portland, that is a policy issue that needs a policy intervention. And so I think Inner East Side for All is a good solution to that. And then street level outreach, going out to people and connecting them with services. We can't wait for people to come to government or nonprofits to try to address some of those needs. And ultimately, my vision for the future is one of housing abundance, that if you work in this city, whether that's in the public sector or private sector, whether you're union or not, that you are able to afford to live in the city. That is a broad, big picture vision that I have, and that one we should be able to achieve through the right policy levers. Second, community safety. So when I think of gun violence, I think of, what are the tools that the city of Portland has? We're not the federal government, we're not state government, and so the tools that I really see are place-based interventions. And so, for example, there's a lot of great work being done through the Safe Blocks program near 122nd and Burnside. So things like street lighting, street trees, great park access. These are things that have historically been left behind in East Portland, and it is no surprise that we see higher rates of gun violence in our community. As a result of that, I'm a strong supporter of the ceasefire program, as Terrence mentioned, which is a collaboration with the Portland Police Bureau and other partners that does intense wraparound case management to those who are most likely to commit gun violence because of a number of factors that person is involved in. And then finally, community-based interventions, so like movies in the park. This is something that has been done in Columbia and other things that kind of build up those community resilience pieces. Finally, health equity. East Portlanders face a 10-year lower life expectancy than the rest of the city. That is a result of higher rates of traffic crashes and a district that's been burdened by gun violence and burdened by a lack of tree canopy and things like that. And so I am committed, and really my lens when I'm looking at city government is going to be how are we reducing disparities between people living east of 82nd Avenue and west, and how are we increasing life expectancy for the people in our community. And we do that through tree canopy, transportation safety, safe routes to school, and supporting public transit and making sure our land use and zoning decisions are smart so that people can age in place and have great neighborhoods to live in with great tree canopy. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. So, I'm glad you mentioned how District 1, of course, has been underrepresented and underinvested in. I know what it's like for communities to be underrepresented and underinvested in because I've been part of most of those communities. So here's what we need to do. First off, we need to invest in jobs, because one way to increase the life expectancy and increase people's access to health care, something we can do at the city level, is to get them good paying jobs. So that means more workforce development programs. That means a public-private partnership version of FDR's Works Progress Administration that would get people job training and then help them find employment within public or private sectors. And we also need to ensure that people are being able to get actually off drugs, because that's actually that's a problem when it comes to getting them employment. So we need to get them detoxed, sobered up, and then get them in the job training program so that they can get good employment. And this will result in them being able to afford more stuff. In fact, I also would like to expand this program to also people work minimum wage jobs. Because while we can't raise the minimum wage here in Portland, what we can do is give those people alternative pathways to higher paying career stuff, and this will also increase the demand of business for those sorts of jobs. So that will result in us investing entirely holistically in the community, and also means that we'll be able to turn Portland, East Portland, into a wealthier region. And then we also have to ensure that we are continuing on the momentum by voicing our concerns at City Hall to invest in better transit. I live right near Burnside, which is one of the few transit lines here. We have so poor transit. This showcases just how the city just, as everyone's been saying, brushes us off. We need to tell them that your time of doing that is gone. Yeah. It's time to really invest in building better transit lines. Specifically, I believe near the Mall 205 area, near Route 205 would be a good place for that. And we also need to be ensuring that through that, we are also having them being built near housing districts and business districts. Those are just like informal terms I'm using. And speaking of housing and business, we need more mixed-use zoning. That's something that will allow us to have a lot more small businesses, and will ensure that we are not just relying on a bunch of large corporations. Because the issue there will be that as those large corporations gobble up more competition, they continue to streamline their services, which results in them employing less and less people. So we need to ensure that we have as many businesses here in East Portland as possible to ensure that we have a steady flow of work for anyone who does not have a college degree, because it should not take a college degree to even afford rent, to support a family, or to own a home. That's just outrageous. Then we also need to talk about public safety, because what public safety is the link that allows society to be possible and separates us from chaos. So that means having...
Go another 30 seconds.
Oh, all right. More so that means having patrols down, particularly near the gateway area, because that area is full of small businesses that have been robbed and broken into. And that also means having a lot more police by hiring up to 1,500 police total, because we are far behind. I believe the last time I checked, the number is 880. That's unacceptable. We also need to improve the morale of police by investing in community policing, as well as integrating them more with the community and ensuring the community views them more as part of them rather than separate. And then that's all the time I have to discuss right now.
Shift.
All right.
I am up and down, squats. All right, so, okay, as I kind of accidentally jumped into in my introduction, on day one, yes, fully fund PSR, Portland Street Response, because I can count on more than one hand when I have tried to call in after, I believe, 8 o'clock, when I found someone having a mental health crisis, and you couldn't get a hold of them. That's just, I feel like it's a vital resource to the city, especially now, especially when we're having such an issue. So, day one. And entwined with that, expand access to mental health care and addiction services. More importantly, though, expand community outreach in District 1. My whole platform is elevating the voices of the Outer East Side. So I want to make sure everybody knows where they can go to make a complaint, to let their concerns be heard. I want to be that platform for you. I want to make sure that if you have a problem, if you have a pothole that isn't filled, if you have some sort of issue, not with your neighbor, but, a bigger issue with the city, that you know where to go, who to talk to, and how we are going to address that, okay? So community outreach is going to be key. And that is another one of, my thingy doodles. And before the election, and this is what my whole platform is before the election, is drive voter education and turnout. So while I was working at Fred Meyer, I talked to people and I said, hey, do you know that I'm running for city council? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, anybody can do it. And now your vote actually matters. So many people I talked to were so disheartened. It's not quite the word. They were burned out because they are not being listened to. And we've all gone over it. Yeah, we've been ignored. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. I want to be, like I said, your voice on the city council. And then finally, I want to work with Multnomah County, more so than I already do, on homelessness and more transparency of the funds that they have but aren't using. Because when I found out that they had, I don't know how much money, a few million just sitting under the couch, and not spending, I want to know why. I want to know why it's just sitting there. I want to know why the county isn't using that to not end, but curb homelessness. So, in broad strokes, fully fund PSR, expand access to mental health care, expand community outreach in District 1, drive voter education and turnout, especially education, because I still don't understand ranked choice voting, and work with Multnomah County on transparency of funds especially. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, it's only me left. Oh, no, you don't have to. I'm way over on the equation.
Just say I'm glad I'm not the only one.
To be fair, nobody understands ranked choice voting. We've all watched the presentation, and none of us understand it.
I have a slide deck. I'm here for you.
Okay, good. My number one is engagement, and that means what a lot of people have talked about is I'm here to listen to, advocate for, and represent the people of East Portland, who really, as we've all said, have gotten the short shrift from the city forever. I remember the joke when I moved here was that Portland stops at 57th, right? And then it became 82nd, and then it became 205. And the problem is my experience is the city of Portland doesn't think that's a joke, or at least hasn't historically. So the next one is livability. We all want, and I think deserve, a city that is a good place to live, right? That means safe, it means clean, it means that we're addressing the needs of the entire community. And I feel like when I listen to a lot of the people from the city and a lot of our current representatives, they are very focused on particular groups, right? We have to represent this group, or we have to do the thing for this group. And I think it's important to get people in City Hall who are listening to everybody, who are taking the needs of everybody, not just a specific special interest. And that doesn't mean they're all bad special interests. It just means there's a lot of us out there who aren't represented by those special interests. And some of that comes to me, for me, in the way homelessness is focused on. We've really heard a lot about the needs of the homeless people, which are incredibly important. But the needs and the way that these things affect everybody in the city needs to be considered and thought about. And so where I work now, we had a homeless camp across the street, right? That doesn't just affect the homeless people who live there. When we're having people dumping raw sewage on the street corner, that's a health and safety issue for everybody, right? Public safety, I think, is incredibly important. I went through with my wife a list of all the things that have happened to us since we bought our house on 113th. I have a car stolen, I've had catalytic converters stolen, I've had people try to move in on my lawn, right? We had our next door neighbor beaten up by 2 homeless guys with a baseball bat, and because we mentioned homeless on the phone, they wouldn't come, nobody ever came. No police response, no nothing. Because you have to call one point of contact once you mention the word homeless, right? That's not the city working for everybody. And to me, you look at affordable housing, obviously, is a huge issue for Portland. Portland's getting more and more expensive, even as interest rates are going up, which is insanity, right? Interest rates going up, home prices should go down. And we really need to focus on building affordable housing, doing the infrastructure changes in terms of codes and other things that people have talked about. But also, one of the things we don't hear a lot from the city is listening to the people who actually do the thing, right? If you want affordable housing built, you're going to have to talk to the people who build it, right? Contractors, developers. You're going to have to listen to them and determine what motivates them to build the housing that they build. Because we get a lot of people saying, oh, we'll change a rule, we'll change a regulation, and then magically it will build. And they don't want to talk to contractors and developers because those guys are evil and all they want is money. But
Noah, can you hit on transportation about 30 seconds? Your time is up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Transportation for me is a huge issue. I'm in the transportation industry. But I also understand from talking to people in East Portland, the Department of Transportation never listens to us at all. Right? They come out here, they tell you what you need, they tell you you need to get out of your car, they tell you that you're bad for driving. And I love public transportation. I think the city should invest in public transportation up the wazoo. But you're not going to get out of your car if it takes you an extra hour to get to work every day. All right? Let's be honest. And they need to make every form of transportation work as efficiently as possible for every citizen of Portland. And that means mass transit, that means bicycles, that means walking, and that means the flow of traffic. It doesn't mean we're going to take every main artery in Portland and go it down to 1 lane. All right? Because I'm not driving to annoy people. I'm driving because I have to go to work, I have to go to the store, I have to live my entire life, right? And I'm not going to get on a max going back to public safety where people are getting stabbed.
Thank you, Noah. All right, Steph, you're up, and you're not going to have to follow Terrence this time.
Make me follow you.
So everybody will get 3 minutes to tell us why they are the best candidate to serve our community.
I'm one of a few candidates who is great, I think. And again, we are not, I love ranked choice voting. I love specifically proportional representation ranked choice voting, multi-member districts. In part, I know, it gets wonky. But in part because we are not opponents, right? We are colleague candidates. And the exciting thing is in this race, through this candidacy, we get to talk about a vision, a positive vision of what the future of Portland can be. And I am excited, I am pulling for everyone here. I'm really excited because we are all East Portlanders. We all care about it, and I think as a few folks have said, candidacy is a service to democracy. and it's a really beautiful thing. So I think that I bring about 20 years of relationships with, particularly with transportation, active transportation, all types. Also, just a fun small story, my dad, who was many things, including a repo man and an auto mechanic, when I became the executive director of Oregon Walks, the first thing he said was, "Are you going to teach those walkers to stay out of my way?" And I was like, his last speeding ticket had been 107 and a 45, and so I was like, "Dad, whenever humanly possible." So there's that. But like I build coalitions, they're pretty big tent. I think that we need someone who, as a few folks have said here, can build bridges and can work with people with whom they disagree and find points of agreement. And that is actually why I filed. I announced my candidacy early, because as people come online, I wanted to meet folks, because at the end of the day, we are all going to be Portlanders at the end of November, and whoever is a city council candidate, either I'm going to be a colleague counselor, or I'm going to be a constituent, and in either way, I want to be as supportive to the future of Portland as I can possibly be. I have pretty deep understanding at this point of land use and zoning. I've been a union member. I've worked a lot of jobs too. I've been a union member of ILWU. I've been a longshoreman, and I'm currently adjunct faculty. If I seem a little frazzled, it's because I have spent all day at PSU teaching classes on community development, and I'm almost expecting y'all to just like melt into your chair like I've seen some folks do today. I believe deeply in East Portland. I care about it. I am pretty darn good at coalition building. I get into weeds and I stay there. I will stay in conversations around walkability. I've read the manual for uniform traffic control devices team. I will read every edition of it. And that's my time.
Timur, you're up.
Okay. I believe I'm one of the best candidates in this race because of my experience working in city government, pulling levers of power, and aligning budgets to meet the needs of community, working with organizations like East Portland in Motion, and aligning those priorities, getting things done on the ground, and East Portland Action Plan with some of those priorities as well. I've also been involved in launching Bike Town, our city's bike share program, launched fixed speed safety cameras to keep our arterials safer, and helped launch the Fixing Our Streets program, which has yielded over $100 million for projects like safe routes to school and street paving, street preservation, street trees, and things like that. And so I believe this lens of project manager, of managing multi-million-dollar budgets, managing scope, managing schedule, and managing risk are a great lens from which to view large-scale programs, policies, and budgets that the city of Portland does. Other thing I'll mention is, this is a district with 100 languages represented. It's very diverse, and I am part of that diversity of being kind of the first Middle Eastern candidate running for city council. Our family speaks Turkish at home, and just kind of having that the opportunity of being the first in my family to be born in the U.S., I can empathize with marginalized communities and people who are really trying to make it by, and kind of have that starter entrepreneur mindset. So those are some of the things. And then I'll just kind of, I don't know when else to put this in here, so I'm just going to put this in here now. I'll just kind of flag the small donor election program that the city has, which is if you as a Portland resident donate $20 to any candidate in this district or outside of this district, that gets matched by the city. And so that becomes $200. And so although I have, let's say for example, a friend from outside the city of Portland donating $200, and now a Portland resident donating $20, is the same. And so I just want you all to be aware that you cannot vote for people outside of your district in November, but you can vote with your dollar of people inside this district and outside this district, because those candidates are going to be making decisions that affect East Portland too. And every single candidate up here is trying to get to 250 donors, Portland donors, to get a $40,000 check from the city. Some of us have already gotten that. But then the next tier is 750 Portland donors. So I just wanted you to know of your role and how you can strategically affect this election by finding candidates that you like in this district and other districts, and making that small donor contribution, $5, $10, and have that donation matched. Thank you.
Same question?
Yes.
Thank you. So, I'm the best candidate here because I believe I'm the one who brings the most holistic view. So, I'm actually more of an academic person when it comes to viewing policy. I look at what does this affect, what other system does this affect, okay, then what should we alter there, etc., etc. So whenever I make a policy decision, I always look at what sort of systems we work at. We are working with to ensure that everything is as cohesive and running as efficiently as possible, because inefficiency is injustice. And we currently have a very inefficient city. We don't feel like a $7 billion city. That is just outrageous, and what we really need to do is really get back to basics and ensuring that just the city is doing the basic things right, because we have so many potholes, we have the 9/11, so long wait times, many people can't even get on the phone with police officers. That is horrible. And what we really need to do right now is take a look at, okay, so these are where we're failing. Now let's look at how we can improve these. For example, I think that we need to create a hotline for PSR when it becomes separate from the fire department, to ensure that people aren't waiting for 20 minutes and then telling you have to call this other number, because that is resulting in longer wait times. And that is just not acceptable, especially if you have a violent person near you. In fact, a friend of mine, a middle school friend of mine when I was in middle school, was killed by her partner in an apartment where she should have been safe by her partner or ex-partner. The story's a little bit murky. And that was horrific. That is completely unacceptable. And that is also why I also want to ensure that we are looking at domestic abuse and also sex trafficking as well. Because these are two things where, particularly in the latter, sex trafficking in Oregon is actually the 7th highest in the nation. So I want to work with groups like FAST to ensure we can bring that down, because that is so many young women who are suffering right now. That's unacceptable. In addition to that, I also want to ensure we are looking at the best ways to build for the future, because I don't just want to build a bunch here and then sort of stifle our ability to do other projects, because that's really going to result in a long-term economic downturn. And what I really want to do is to ensure that we are building a city that has more room to grow in the future, both culturally and economically. So that's the sort of viewpoint I bring to the council. I am also a maverick, but also one who is able to build coalitions. I'm well known for being a maverick in the County Democratic Party, and I'm also well known for being able to build coalitions within that and outside of that as well, from a broad, diverse interest groups. And we're going to need that kind of person at City Hall, especially if Donald Trump gets elected, to be honest, because there's a genuine possibility that he could get elected, and we are probably going to need federal funds. That's my time.
Thank you, Deian. Thomas?
Thank you. Why am I the best candidate? Well, because I've lived where I've lived, East Portland, my whole life. Because I've worked where I've worked, the Gateway area, for about 15 years, and because I've studied where I've studied, Portland State University, but more importantly, the Portland Public School System, I bring a unique perspective, but it's not one that's unique to me. I believe it's one that is unique to us. I have seen our city, our part of the city, ignored. And that's why, like I said, I want to be your voice, okay? And if it's not me, I want you to find the candidate that is. Even if you don't vote for me, I want you to find, and I want to help you find the candidate that is right for you. Because at the end of the day, this is our chance, the first chance we've had to actually have our voices heard by the city and have a hand on the wheel of government. If it's my hand representing you, that's great. If it's not, I want to make sure everyone has a vote and knows that they can vote, and the ranked choice voting system, I want to make sure that your voices are heard. And because because I work within the parole and probation system, I have seen some pretty terrible things. And because I've worked in the Gateway area, I've seen more terrible things. And growing up in the Portland public school system, there were really a lot of inequities that need to be addressed. And I feel like we all know that. I feel like we know that Portland Public isn't the best. And I know that, like David Douglas, where I send my kids, is a little better, but all the school systems representing Portland need to be up to that level. And I feel like because I've lived through it, because I've seen it, because I've been there, because of that unique perspective that we all share, I can be that voice. I can be that hand on the wheel of the government for you. But if not, let's find a candidate that is right for you. I want to drive voter turnout. I want to drive voter education because I am genuinely excited that we get to represent ourselves. Not only get to, we have to. You have to live over here to be on the city council in District 1. So, that's why I'm one of the best. And if I'm not, find another one that is, okay? Even if you don't vote for me, please make a plan to vote.
Yeah, great.
I feel like I'm certainly one of the best candidates. I know that there's a lot of great candidates, but because I bring a diverse background of experience. I've been a short order cook, I've been an attorney, I've been a cab driver, I've worked at a lumber mill, and I jump around jobs too much. And now I'm a superintendent at a cab company, as well as their in-house counsel. And I have therefore had a huge amount of experience working with different groups of people. I mean, we know that Portland is the whitest major city in the United States. And one of the great joys I have at working at Radio Cab is we have one of the most diverse workforces in the entire city. Right? I work with people from all over the world, and I hear what they're concerned about, and I hear what problems they're having or what issues they face. And I've just, I love working with different people and hearing what they need. They need from me, they need from our business, they need from the city. And that's what I will bring. I also like to believe that I will bring a real pragmatism that I don't think we see a lot in government, right? We see a lot of ideologues in government. I believe in this policy. I believe that this is the way we should do things. And I will bring a very focused, outcome-based view to city council. I'm not married to your program, right? If your program works, and you can demonstrate that it works, and you tell me what the goal is of your program and how it's going to do what it's going to do, and it works, I'll support you. But if your program doesn't work, the answer isn't let's do more of this program that doesn't work because I believe that's how we should handle this situation, right? It's let's look for a solution that achieves the outcomes that we need for Portland. I also think I'm the best a good candidate, the best candidate, because with a legal experience and with experience advocating to government for the last 10 or so years as part of my job, I recognize the problems that occur when the city government doesn't listen to the people they regulate and when they write code, frankly, that is terrible. It's just terribly written because it's written by lay people. No offense to lay people. You're all wonderful lay people. But it's written by people who don't necessarily focus on ensuring that the code that they write actually is going to achieve the outcomes that they want. And so I bring that level of nerdiness to, okay, I see what we're trying to say here. Can we actually say it and make it work so that it does what we want it to do? Thanks.
All right, so I'm gonna shift on you. Thank you. I said this earlier. We all know the problem. We see it with our own eyes. Y'all really don't need us to tell y'all that we don't feel safe no more. Our streets aren't clean anymore. We want to be able to be humane, but we want our sidewalks back. Those are not contrary to each other. We need balanced representation in City Hall, and I do think that we do have some amazing folks up here who will be able to represent things that I might not have the experience or the lived experience to represent. And so I'm gonna lean on them like Steph said about me. And I'm gonna argue and I'm gonna fight in the best interest of our community. But I'll tell you something. When it comes to public safety, I know because I walked it. And I continue to walk it. And I continue to find the balance between community and policing. I'm not just talking about it. We brought up ceasefire, our work as a community advocate. My job in ceasefire is to go into the community and talk about the methods that the city of Portland have committed to reduce gun violence. It's what I do every day. I show up at the murder scenes when y'all see the lights flashing. Every day. When there's a murder, I'm one of the first people to get a call. So the reason I don't get up here and talk bad about our police officers is because I see the care. The reasons I say we gotta continue to invest in our community-based organizations is because I see the care. And it doesn't mean an officer can't do something stupid, and if they do, and they need to be held accountable, we talk about it. We hold officers accountable. There's always say there's three types of officers. There's a good officer that works every day we never talk about because it's not good news. There's a good officer that made a bad decision that we need to hold accountable but not destroy their life. And there are bad officers, and there's less bad officers than the rest, and they get all the attention. And we need to separate folks who do harm intentionally. Intentional harm in the community. We need to work to separate them. I'm having real conversations about how to do that without targeting officers that made mistakes because it's politically exciting, right? We don't want that. This is the work I do every day. I am helping make our community safer. So when y'all talk about how you feel when you wake up and you walk around, we're working on that every day, right? I am going out into our high schools, into our community, challenging the young people to get into the trades. We talk about college not being the only way. Our country was built middle class on the trades, on people that woke up every day and worked. This is crazy that my generation got tricked into thinking that college was the end all. I've already committed to turning that tide and engaging our young folks. What is happening? What do I do in my company? I hire formerly incarcerated black men and women. Why are they not out committing crimes? Because I tell them that they can be a better version of themselves. I work their butts off every day. So when they done working, they go home and sit down somewhere. And then we bring support around them. We bring real support and accountability. We don't free them to be by themselves during hard times. We answer that call at 3 in the morning. My management answer that call, and you can't even manage in my company if you're not committed to the people. So why am I one of the best amongst many? Because I really know what it's going to take for us to feel safe and not dismiss the people that need help. Thank you all.
Okay, this is the final essay question, and we'll start with Timur. What legislation would you propose or support to hold nonprofits serving the homeless population accountable and to ensure their activities do no harm to the community?
Who first?
2 minutes.
You mind repeating it?
Yeah. What legislation would you propose or support to hold nonprofits serving the homeless population accountable and to ensure their activities do no harm to the community?
Okay. So first, I will start by saying this is really hard work for the people that are doing this street level engagement. And those people need to be able to have a living wage so that they themselves are not either relying on services or contributing to a high turnover. And so that is point number one, is making sure the people doing this hard, valuable work for our community are able to live here and able to do that sustainably and not get burned out, because we're then paying more money to address that. The second thing I'll say is, on a policy level, we need to be doing everything we can toward toward housing abundance. One of the challenges we see right now is the fastest growing sector of our population that is becoming housing insecure is people over the age of 55. And I'm someone, coming from a project management perspective and looking at budgets, the second someone gets out on the street, the more money we are paying to address that because now it's exponentially more expensive. And so that's another key piece. In terms of accountability for nonprofits, we need to make sure they're adequately staffed and that they're having this, as Steph said, the shelter to housing continuum. So like when someone is in shelter, how are we getting them to their next step of driver's license and other things like that? I will support things like expungement so that a past criminal record does not then become a barrier to someone accessing employment or accessing housing. So we can't be stepping on our own feet as we're trying to address some of these larger issues. So those are kind of some of the key points that I would flag. And I think my experience as someone who has graduated law school and passed the bar and this criminology background, I think would also help in addressing some of those key metrics in terms of service delivery and things like that.
Thank you. Yeah, you have 2 minutes. Do you want me to read the question again?
Yeah. So holding nonprofits accountable. So I'm glad you actually brought that up because one of the key platform stuff is accountability. And so first off, I've never been a huge fan of the nonprofit model as it currently exists. It was introduced by the Reaganites and the Nixonites. So first off, what we need to do is establish an oversight board for any nonprofit that would receive city or local funds. I think that's the first step. Second, I also believe that we need to be centralizing our communications because frankly, we have so many nonprofits here in Portland that there's a nonprofit for every single person in Portland. I'm 100% sure of that. And so we need to ensure that we are being able to consolidate that to ensure that it's just manageable at all, because right now it isn't. And that's probably a large reason why so many are slipping through the cracks who aren't doing as good work as they should. And then we also need to ensure that what we are investing in, is this going to ensure that the city as a whole is improving at the current stuff we need to look at? Because we need to learn how to prioritize. And it looks like the city doesn't know how to prioritize. Let me tell you, I'm an autistic person. And if you know anything about autistic people, it's that we know how to prioritize doing one thing at a time. So we need to teach the city how to do that again. And that's what I'm going to do when I'm elected to Portland City Council. Thank you.
How to keep nonprofits accountable. I will be the first to admit when I don't know the answer to something off the top of my head, and right now is one of those times. And I will always defer to people who are smarter than me in that area. I've heard a lot of good ideas so far. What comes to my mind is transparency of funds, because if you can see where the money is going, you can stop any abuse of those funds. Because I feel like a lot of nonprofit shenanigans is tied up in abuse of funds. However, that is my limited scope, and I will always, like I said, defer to people who are much smarter on that front. So transparency, creating an oversight board, like my colleague here said. Yeah, that would be how I would address that, really. I feel like just making sure that you hold those nonprofits accountable for their actions and see where they're spending the money that the city is giving them to, actually serve people on the street, which is a valuable service. But, on the other hand, you can't have them abusing those funds and just having, free run of the city just because they say they're doing good. So I feel as though Oversight Committee, checking for transparency of funds, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot better ideas from people who are a lot more well-versed in this area.
Thank you.
The question again? Yes. What legislation would you propose or support to hold nonprofits serving the homeless population accountable? And we could probably take out the homeless population, just nonprofits accountable, and to ensure their activities do no harm to the community.
Well, I honestly think there's probably 2 different answers to whether or not you include the homeless population in the question. And One is, if it's just generally nonprofits who are receiving public funds, then oversight, transparency, being really clear, again, what your outcome goal is, right? You hold whoever you're giving funds to, whether it's departments within the city or nonprofits who you are engaging to solve a particular problem, you should be able to say to them, if we give you this money, what will you accomplish with that money? What's the measurable outcome? And that's how you hold people accountable. And if you don't achieve the measurable outcome, you stop giving them money, right? But when you go to the homeless question, is we give nonprofits a lot of money to help us solve the homeless problem, to get people to housing, to get people to treatment. And I think the number one issue that I have heard from people both near places where her services are provided to homeless people and people within specifically residential buildings for homeless people is security. It just is security. And we're looking at a new bottle exchange. They're trying to open one on 122nd, and not everybody, but lots of people are saying, wait a minute, the previous bottle exchanges end up being a line of people exchanging their bottles and walking over to the drug dealer who's standing right there. And that's unacceptable, right? Also, it's unacceptable that a place like that is essentially outsourcing their security to the Portland Police Bureau, right? If you are creating an environment where you are bringing people in and you are talking to the community, because I don't think most people are NIMBYs, right? I don't want to hear, you want to help people. We have compassion, but we want to help people and be safe. We want to help people and not have needles in our yard and, homeless camps, not just in the place where we're serving the homeless people, but now it's 5 blocks in each direction, right? And I think a real part of that is requiring nonprofits who serve the homeless community and bring the homeless community to a particular place to provide them services, something we all want, also has some responsibility for ensuring that the people who live in the neighborhood don't suffer negative effects as a result of that.
Thank you, Noah. Terrence?
So, first, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, because I'm also committed to not talking about stuff I don't know about, but I actually know about this. I appreciate your honesty, because we need that type of approach. So, again, I work every day with 4 not-for-profits that specifically focus on gun violence reduction. My job as a community advisor to those not-for-profits is to make sure that their funding is actually being used the way it should be, right? Are we seeing reduction? Do we have measurement tools to see reduction? And my job is, if they're not producing, first, you guys, we support them, right? We try to get them to a point where they actually can do the work, because we know the work is being done. We know the work is needed. I'm sorry about that. So we support them first. We do the same thing we do when we want to hold police accountable. We meet, we build relationships, we make sure we understand policy and procedures. We don't jump the gun simply because we're interpreting information a certain way. Most people actually think our gun violence is worse historically than it is. We're actually doing better. But if I talk to you about the way you feel, you don't feel safer when it comes to gun violence. So you gotta actually know what you're talking about, because if the measurement is lower gun violence, I'm gonna say we're actually doing well, right? So how do we hold them accountable, right? We make sure that the systems are set up. You guys have to do it. I hate to put that on y'all, but hear me out. Just hear me on this. You can do public records requests. When you see these not-for-profits or any organization that is taking city money and they're not showing up when y'all call them, they're not helping clear houses camps, illegal camps and setups, when they're not helping and showing up to certain calls, you can do a public records request. So what is my commitment to policy? My policy is going to be to tell y'all how to go hold government and folks accountable for wasting y'all money, right? And then, as a government, we need to audit, and if they're not doing it, we shift to somebody that's going to actually do the work. We don't take the funding away, you guys. That is not an answer. We put that funding somewhere to somebody that's going to get the work done. You guys actually have a lot more, not just this ability to vote for us, but you can actually pull non-for-profits information. You can see how they're spending their money, and you need public officials that's going to help make that, like you said, Steph, the process easier to be able to see what non-for-profits are doing. Right, I am actually already doing that work. You get an environmental question, and I'm gonna get my butt kicked today. But if you're talking about public safety, accountability with CBOs, I'm doing that work. It starts with relationships. It's the same relationships I build with the PPA and PPB before I draw down on them. I'm doing that with CBOs. I'm helping create best practices, and then I am, for sure, you guys, going in to our mayor, to our city council, to our police chief, and I'm saying these things aren't working. We need better alternatives. So I'm here.
Yes. And also, I really want to appreciate something that Timur said, which is like looking at there has been an incredible amount of overturn in folks who are offering social services. There is an incredible amount of burnout. These are folks who are on the front lines. I do believe that we need to be working on doing a living wage, because there's a lot of folks who are doing that work and then going into deeply affordable housing. They never get a break. They never get to come back to themselves. So I think that is really important. I'd also like to, because I do believe, I think we need to acknowledge that I like to take accountability for me, and in this case, like as someone who is a candidate for city council, we need to talk about where the buck stops, and that is at city council. And recognizing, just acknowledging that any time that we are outsourcing, if we are contracting out to another organization, whether it's a business, whether it's a nonprofit, that we are still ultimately accountable, and we are recognizing, we are taking an actual step into saying that we are trusting another, and we are outsourcing, and that is a choice. And so just acknowledging that. I also want to, because y'all have said so many other things, I get to say one wonky thing, if I can, which is the word procurement. That if you have ever, and I have, as a nonprofit ED, like gone through the process of getting a contract or a grant, and that takes 9 months.
Or longer.
Or longer, thank you. And you're supposed to be actually working on that contract for these 9 months. And so you've got 3 months to do 1 year of work. Make that make sense. So I think like there's some work that we need to do internally as the city council to work on that procurement process, to set our community partners, whether they are businesses or whether they are nonprofits, up to actually do the job that we are wanting them to do. Thank you.
All right, we've got a couple of yes/no questions. So you raise your hands if you pledge not to support any activity that you would not want at your front door or in your neighborhood. If you don't want it, if you pledge, raise your hand if you pledge not to support any activity that you don't want at your front door or in your neighborhood.
They're looking for a gotcha.
There's no gotcha. No, that's good. Put your hand. Raise your hand if you pledge not to support funding tents, tarps, or harm reduction kits going forward.
Say that again.
Raise your hand if you pledge not to support tents, tarps, and harm reduction kits.
Not to support.
Not to support.
Can I understand support? Yeah,
Wait, kind of, can you
Yeah,
That's
nothing.
Okay, so you say are you going to give tents? Do you still believe in giving tents out as a way of dealing with things?
Do you oppose giving out harm reduction in tents and
I don't think those things are all equivalent.
Yeah, that's kind
Okay,
of,
let's separate them.
okay.
Will you not fund giving out tents and tarps?
Will you,
For
no,
the most part, yes.
So we've got one candidate.
who's going to say that you, what are you saying?
Oh yeah, for the most part, unless it's like a very niche emergency situation, that I will not support handing out more tents and tarps.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the question.
Noah, are you a yes or a no?
I'm a halfway because, again, I'm not married to a program. What is the goal that you want to achieve by giving out tents and tarps or harm reduction? Who is it? How is it going to benefit the community or the homeless people? And what benefit are you getting from it? I mean, I think it's just it's such a complex issue that it's very hard to say without more yes or no.
Let me preface this. Handing out tents or tarps to be placed in your front yard.
No, I won't vote for it.
Giving out tents and tarps to be put in a managed, city managed or county managed facility.
Right.
That's a different story.
That's a whole different question.
I'm talking about in our neighborhoods. Do you support funding tents and tarps in our neighborhood? Raise your hand.
Do we?
No.
I just fooled.
I'm now completely.
I know exactly.
Yeah, you turned it around.
So
I know what he says. I get it too. I'll give 5 seconds like you did.
Yeah.
Oh, go.
I personally come from addict parents, and when I asked my mom about harm reduction, she said it didn't help, but she understood the importance when people are in addiction to helping them out as much as possible. As far as tents and tarps, I think I want to focus, and I think City Council needs to be focused on getting people off of the streets. Tents and tarps are not that expensive to where I think budget-wise it kills us. I think we need to focus on avenues to get our houses, people housed. And I think that's why we all, I also am a person that if I see you on the streets, I'll give you a blanket. And I'll give you, whether I want you in front of my home or not, I'll give you a blanket and I want you warm. So I don't think as a major investment that works as far as getting people in homes. But I think as a person that just love folks in the community, I don't want to see them cold either. So. I'm terribly unbalanced, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'd say to add on to that, I'd say, like for me, the travesty is like tents and tarps. That's all we have.
Right.
Right now, that's what we.
And
We don't have
and
shelter.
why is that?
Like we need. Well, I mean, there's a whole shelter. The housing continues project.
We have a homelessness revolving door complex, so.
Yeah, it's whatever the city does not work.
And I actually want to get at what I think that this question is getting at, and that is time, place, manner restrictions. And the fact is, we in Portland are the most generous when it comes to allowing people to sleep outdoors. Most cities give them bedrolls, we give them tents. That is very unique, and I think that we don't necessarily need to be doing that. In niche situations, sure, but for the most part, it's not really necessary. So,
I'll just take my 5 seconds to say, shelters are difficult to access sometimes, and we see major climate events occurring more and more frequently. And I'm kind of tap on to what Terrence is saying. If that blanket is what's going to keep someone alive overnight, then I believe that should happen. And then in terms of overdose prevention sites and things like that, I would just say, I'm looking at it as what is the city's return on investment for that, and are we using that as a point to connect people to services and to manage and help those long-term goals, and kind of looking at it from a return on investment piece.
To piggyback off of what he just said, basically harm reduction creates inroads to other services, so that's like not the real service, that is creating that bond between those service workers that gets them to the actual help they need. Nobody wants to have people doing drugs at a certain spot, no, really. But if they can do it safely and get connected to the housing and get connected to addiction services and get connected to mental health services, I think that is where I think that's where the value lies. So that's why I couldn't raise my hand to that because
That's a lot of ifs.
We also want clean parks.
Everyone
We have certain neighborhoods that have had tents and tarps and homeless people doing drugs, selling drugs outside of their front door for years. So it kind of breaks our heart to hear you guys supporting and continuing funding of this activity.
I don't think that's what
say
you're
that.
Yeah.
I know you said that those are not
Yeah.
expensive, but it just make
Well-
it too convenient for people to settle down. Like we saw people just like set the tent there,
Right.
waiting for people to come.
Right, but I might be the one person I did make really clear with the preventative paraphernalia thing. As a child of addicts, I don't touch that. To watch people die either way is how I see it. I'm not going to be as popular as more folk on this, but whether or not I give them a needle that destroys them or I give them a clean needle that destroys them, they're dying. So as far as that, that's my conviction because my parents are addicts. So understand my heart there. It's a bit different than I think as some political question. For me, it's real. And either way, I watch my friends and family die. So it doesn't, when I talk about it doesn't help in my opinion in that way. As far as the tents and things go, I will stand by the fact that I don't want you with a camping outside of my home. And I don't think anybody should do anything to empower you to bully me. But again, if I see you cold and I see you hungry, I'm gonna always lean there. And I do think for me, those are two different things.
I agree.
I have personal experience some with this as well because I actually had to get a friend sober because she was at that time she herself almost became homeless in another state. So I was the one who had to talk to her and get her sober. And I also believe that this also gets to the real issue, and that is the access to drugs. We need to be fighting the access to drugs. I've always been of the opinion that we need to reduce systemic inequities in the war on drugs, not abandon it altogether. That I think is lunacy, and we've seen it fail in other countries. Just look at China and the opium wars and the opium trade. We have to really just crack down on the access to drugs, crack down on drug dealers, and a lot more. And I pledge to you that I will fight the rampant drug epidemic in our society right now, including like fentanyl in Portland, but also there's so many other stuff like opioids across the country that we need to be really fighting. So,
I was going to say that the reason that it's never 100% one or the other, if I don't want a camp across the street from your house for 2 years, and if giving one of those homeless people a tent in a city-controlled, designated camping area where we can provide sanitation, we can provide services, if that's the motivator to get somebody to move, right, then that's cheap at twice the price, right? But you know, and again, so 100% rule, would I never do that? No. Look at what you're trying to achieve. I would love to get you out from in front of his house, and if a tent's going to do that and a sleeping bag's going to do that, then let's do that, right? Because there's a carrot and a stick, right? It's not, I don't want to have someone come in and just shove everybody somewhere. I want to give you a motivation to go to a place where we can provide you services and we can also protect the city of Portland.
Do we agree that handing out tents and tarps to go to public spaces is different than handing out tents and tarps to go to managed spaces?
yes, and in fact, we need more managed spaces. We need those places to be spacious, welcoming, clean, and we need to ensure that people are going there because I think that we shouldn't have people camping on the sidewalks. I think that's inhumane, and I also think that we need to be also incentivizing them to want to go to those places. And part of the reason they don't want to go to them right now is because they're so crowded and they're poorly, they're set aside some small shabby lots. So we need to be enforcing the law and ensuring that they are going to those places. We also need to make them where it also won't risk their mental health as well. Because if you have a bunch of people in a crowded space, guess what happens? People's mental health drops like a cliff. And as someone who works on the Children's Levy, the Organ Officer Commission, the Governor's Child Foster Care Advisory Commission, I know with personal and professional experience that that's a horrible situation to put people in. So that's why we need to be providing spacious designated camping areas and banning camping on the sidewalks and areas that aren't those designated areas.
Thomas, we're going to start with you. 1 minute for closing.
1 minute for closing statements. So, excuse me. Like I said, I want you to get out and vote, even if it's not for me, because clearly we all have different opinions on a lot of different things. However, what I can promise you is that I will always listen to your side, okay? It is a nonpartisan position that I'm running for, and we don't get to choose who is in our district, and I want to represent everybody there. So you can count on me to listen to you, to listen to your concerns and your perspectives, and to make sure that they are represented on the city council. There are a lot of people that are going to come in with a lot of their own ideas, a lot of what they think that the city needs, and I want to make sure that what you think the city needs is represented. So, you know, and if that's not me, don't vote for me, but please, like I said, vote.
Yes, so as I believe we've seen here, I'm not just a maverick, but I'm pragmatic and I'm holistic. I believe that I bring the skill set as well as the ability to build the coalitions, as I've said, as well as really focus on accountability, which includes empowering the auditor to audit those nonprofits, as well as to audit things in general, because we are spending so much and getting so little in return. That I believe that I am the one who will be able to help lead Portland back to a city of opportunity and hope. I have a lot more ideas and a lot more stuff about me that I wasn't able to discuss my time here, and I'm excited to get the opportunity to speak about that in the future. Thank you.
Hitting my head
I'm someone who has a vision and is able to achieve that vision through specific investments, and I'm proud of the history of my work experience of leveraging the tools of government, whether that's procurement, contracting, investments, to really shape those community outcomes. We have the people who are going to be elected to represent you. We have specific, specific policy choices that we're going to have to make. And as someone who's worked in city government, you don't have unlimited money. You don't have all of the tools you would like to have. And so we have to be able to make decisions that are going to move us in the right direction in terms of climate, safety, transportation, and health. And I believe, based on my values, that I would be someone who takes us in that direction. And I'm proud of the endorsements I've received from East County Rising and IBEW Local 48, Electrical Workers Union, and I will be someone who fights for zoning equity and making sure that when we have distribution of different sites and places, that those will be distributed evenly throughout the city and not just dumped on East Portland like it has been. Thank you.
Steph Routh, running for Portland City Council. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, because community involvement is an important thing. I'll be around. My website is www.steph4eastportland.com, and just how to say? Sorry, I'm totally frazzled today. One of my favorite folks who was in elected office for a number of years used to talk about how he searches for the honorable opposition, that we don't necessarily agree, and it's actually through those disagreements, as we do it with respect and as we really engage on difficult conversations that we have had today, that we get to better policy. And I have an endless appetite for that, and I look forward to working with and hopefully fighting with all of you. That's it.
The extremity of spectrum is why a question always seems like that I hate homeless people because I want peace on my own streets. I reject extreme positions. Our city has got caught in extreme everything, and that's why we're divided. That's why there's no peace. That's why if I say I care about the houses community, you might feel like I don't care about you. What I've committed to is I will not live in extreme positions. I will both learn to care about our houses community while simultaneously making sure that our homeowners and our business owners are not bullied and have peace also. We do not have to determine that those things are at odds with each other, because for a lot of years in our city, they were not. We were a city that cared, that loved, and that took care of each other. I'm committed to getting that city back, And I'm committed to making sure, brother, that you can walk in front of your home safely and that the houses folks are also have shelter. We gotta stop acting like we're a sanctuary type of place and we're not covering and sheltering people. So I'm committed to that. I think we can do both. We can care for people on both ends of this argument. And that's what I'll do. Thank y'all.
Not necessarily as great a public speaker as some of these people, but you know, I think I'm Noah Ernst. Again, the only one without a picture. But if you vote for me, if you support me for city council, again, the number one thing I care about is engagement with the people of East Portland, advocating for you and representing you to the best of my ability in a way that is rational, pragmatic. Let's figure out what we need to do. Let's get it done. Let's see if what we're doing is working. And I think that something Terrence said is really important. I think we've been sold in this country and in this city the idea that everything is an alternative, right? You can't help the homeless and want law enforcement. You can't love public transportation and bicycles and think people should be able to drive to work. I don't think those things are alternatives. I think that we can do things to provide great transportation for everybody, to deal with crime in a really effective way, and recognize that some people don't need to be criminals, they need to services. And so I think that is the kind of balance and pragmatism that I would bring to City Council, and I hope you all vote for me. Thank you.
We've got one more guest.
I have a question. How long is the term for a council?
I can answer that. Yeah, it actually depends on your district. So
District 1?
District 1 is 4 years
Okay.
because it has lower turnout, and so District 2 in North Portland also is 4 years. And then District 3 and 4, that's Inner, Southeast, and West, they're only going to be elected for a 2-year term, and then in 2026 they'll be aligned with the governor, and then at that point there'll be a 4-year term. So all of council will be elected this November, but then it'll be staggered in 2026.
Yeah, half and half.
Thank you for that. So we've got a special guest, Ernst with the union president for the Portland Police Bureau. I thought it'd be nice to hear maybe 3 or 4 minutes from him, and then if the candidates have any questions for him.
My picture's not on the thing. My name is Aaron Schmaltz. I'm the president of the Portland Police Association. I represent kind of all of our frontline workers or police officers in the city and our dispatchers as well. This election is really important to me. I was born and raised in Portland, and also I worked patrol in East Portland for the majority of my patrol career. East Portland is very dear to my heart because I feel like it's kind of where I cut my teeth as a police officer, but it's also a very unique area of town. All of these kind of pernicious issues, these intractable problems we're talking about, they kind of manifest themselves in East Portland differently than anywhere else in the city. The services that we see talked about in downtown quite a bit, they're not out here. East Portland isn't kind of an everything desert, but it has some of the most Portlandy Portlanders that we have. Because you guys all know what it's like to fight. You know what it's like to kind of just figure out how to make things work. And the city owes you better. This also has been, I have navigated the politics of Portland for the last 4 years doing my job, but I've been on our board for a long time. Terrence actually kind of awoken my soul to what this election was going to be when he walked up to me when we were on the governor's task force together. And he said, "Aaron, how do I get your endorsement?" I started laughing because he's a peculiar person to ask me that question. Because everyone in the room thinks he shouldn't ask me that question. And the thing that's really cool about it is everyone should want everyone's endorsement, because we've spent the last 4 years being siloed against each other and told that we can't work together. But in reality, we're all just a bunch of Venn diagrams, but we're bound together by a lot of different things. It might just be the fact that we're from Portland. It might be the fact that we're not from Portland, but we're coming from different places. We're immigrants. Portland has IRCO. We have so many different things. But we are all bound together by the fact that this election is the most important thing we're ever going to do, because it's going to be a mess, because nobody knows what's next. But we're all in it together. I represent our cops, and I want to be a part of what that together looks like. And I also think it's important that as we look at who our candidates are, that we figure out why they're running, what they're doing, why they're doing it. You're seeing candidates clamor towards public safety. We're seeing candidates sign pledges not to work with public safety environments. Who we are has to be together. And if you have questions about why the police do what they do, why our dispatchers have the hold times they have, all of the things, I know because Terrence and I have sat and had coffee quite a bit, and he has asked me all the questions, and he has challenged me. But I know that my police officers, they go to the same calls, they hear the cries for help, they sit with the grieving mothers. I mean, my love for East Portland began, there was a really tragic fatal accident on 148th pushing down towards Holgate. One of my good friends who quit being a police officer because he was broken by it, but he went on a call, little girl asking for help, spent time with the family, and she was killed in a car crash like a week later because there aren't sidewalks out here. And that for me was the rending of my soul of the lack of resource that exists in this part of town. We can build all that together. It's interesting hearing all the different platforms because all these different things, the one thing that unites all of them is public safety. But community safety is not just police. It is things like PSR. It is things like CBOs. But we only do that together if we function together. PSR is a partner. Police are a partner. None of us are pariahs, but we've all got to figure out what this all means together. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to be available. I am happy to come to any community meeting, group, dinner table, whatever. Our cops went through a time in 2020. We've got to be good. We've got to be accountable. But we are a part of the solution. We're not the solution, but we're a part of it. So happy to be here. Sorry, I'm just pointing to cameras. Say it again?
When are you going to get cameras?
They should be rolling out in the fall.
Why that long? What can we do as a group to get that moving?
we are at the bureaucratic morass portion of that conversation. On the body cameras, I would just like to say, because I've had this conversation more than I care to ever say that I have. The PPA and our cops have been in support of cameras since like 2010. The conversation about body cameras has had this hilarious back and forth as things do in Portland. Funding was an issue for a while. There's some conversations with different people about whether or not they were a solution or not. There's a lot of different things there, but it kept coming and going and coming and going. Where we're at now, we're in full agreement. They're coming. We did the pilot. We're making a few changes to the policy to make sure it will function well. But now the bureaucratic portion is spending millions of dollars on getting them installed, doing all the things, and the DOJ doing the final sign-off because God bless them. So I thought it would come a lot quicker. My understanding is right now they're doing so we did the pilot, and because of the way procurement works in the city, they couldn't buy the equipment until the pilot was signed off on. I don't know why, I just know that's what the initial purchase, getting things installed, and having the government install things is fun. I'm hoping it's summer. It should have been already. It's not anyone's fault. It's not, but that's where we're at. It's coming. Just got to get the cameras, get them installed, get everyone trained, and then off we go.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? I'm hoping some candidates might have some questions.
We should be talking about the outsized role in the past few years private security companies have had, and how we need to figure out how to tackle that from a combined holistic perspective. So
I ran our bar detail downtown, worked intricately with public safety or with private security in that role. I also ran our youth services division and worked intricately with our CSOs. Security has a role, just like all these other things we talked about. The important thing to me is about role setting and understanding authority. The big thing with law enforcement is given by our state legislature specific authority to accomplish certain things. The real problem with PSR, and this is not a tangent, I promise, is that, again, it's a wonderful program, but we got to be clear about what legal authority they have to affect change and what role as a first responder they are. Same thing with private security. Good eyes on the ground, able to take action as it relates to private property, but once they spill out into the street, they don't have the legal authority to affect change in many ways. And so we need to be careful about over-promising or misrepresenting the authority different groups have, and instead weave our response together to ensure that our dollars are well spent, and also that we're delivering on the promises of what we're suggesting we can accomplish with certain groups.
Could you speak briefly to the, I believe there's a ballot measure in November, and maybe just what that is,
Sure.
and who's running it and why, and what it's hoping to accomplish?
How much time do we have?
As long as you guys want to listen, we're good.
So the PPA introduced 2 ballot measures, and again, a lot of times I feel like a lot of these ballot measures come through kind of shadow whatever. We talked to a lot of groups, a lot of business groups, a lot of community groups. Everyone was interested in these conversations, but I also personally, as the president of my organization, didn't want to hide the ball. The reality is we have a crisis of public safety, and we also have a recruitment and retention reality, and we have an accountability problem in our city. And it's important that we get all these things right so that our public safety system is healthy. The first ballot measure that we introduced discusses use of marijuana funds to ensure that we have good recruitment and retention and funding for the programs that matter to the people in the city. And again, both these ballot measures were based on polling that we did. We wanted to make sure that the voices of Portlanders all over were heard and not just a handful of very loud voices. So the first ballot measure, it touches on PSR, ensuring that it's fully funded and fully staffed. It touches on police and ensuring that we have enough, and is just really set up to ensure that our recruitment and retention efforts, and also access to other services such as a drop-off center. We need a detox. The fact that we don't have a place to take people who are in need is ridiculous. And attachment to addiction services. The second one touches on our Police Accountability Commission. And now this would take a really long time for me to fully unpack, but I will just say the biggest issue, the ballot measure in 2020 that was passed that was set up to create a new accountability commission did a few things, but it didn't do a lot. There were about 3 or 4 things within that thing that were isolated into charter, for sure can't change things. The main 3 of those were the makeup of the board. The makeup of the board suggested that the people who were members of the board should be people who have had negative interactions with law enforcement, suffered from addiction or alcoholism. In my opinion, when you're building a jury, you want to make sure that you don't stick your thumb on the scale because it creates trust issues in that group. You also can't be somebody who has had family who is in law enforcement. And again, my opinion is it's unconstitutional to just immediately other people when you're creating a group like this. Another is the funding. The way the funding mechanism is set up, it is 5% of the police budget, regardless of what that budget is. And we're talking about budget accountability. The challenge becomes, let's say we put this whole thing together and the budget that we can come up with is $5 million. Well, 5% of our budget is $12.5 million. Currently on our accountability system, which is very robust, we're spending $3.5 million. So we've got to come up with $9 million to spend, and we must do it. The government is a lemonade stand theory. This is a weird look at that. My opinion is we're electing a whole bunch of new people. We should give them budget authority in totality to budget for things appropriately. If we need $12.5 million, spend the $12.5 million, I don't care. But let's make sure we don't force you to spend the $12.5 million, because there's a whole bunch of stuff we can spend the $12.5 million on if we don't need to. And the last is the imposition of discipline, and this is the most important thing. There is not a single city in this country, not a single one, that gives authority to hire and fire employees to people outside of the people that get to be elected. And the problem with that is that in our system that exists, if we end up in a very political ecosystem, and we've seen Portland kind of snap back and forth in that world, the chief of police and the city, the mayor, the electeds, all of them could say, we've looked at this, this is legal, we're good with this. But the board, again, if it is weighted improperly and makes a decision to fire a police officer, the people who actually have to arbitrate that case is the city. And we create an environment where we're potentially pitting the city against our own community. And that is a very tenuous position for us to be. And so instead, my opinion is we need fully robust community accountability. We need a fully seated community accountability board that serves as an advisory group to make sure that we have a full finding, they have access, they do their investigation, they do all the things. They provide that finding to the chief and to the mayor. The chief and the mayor look at it, they do their thing, and you, as a kind of triad, make a decision that both weighs community input, weighs the input of your police chief, who is a police executive and he's the boss. And you also have the elected, who is the police commissioner, and they make that decision. It will lead to less conflict, it will lead to less arbitrations, and it will lead to less uncertainty around our discipline system. Us being different is fun, we do it all the time. But in this case, I think it will lead to significant discord between our officers, and that is why we're hoping, again, to make sure that what the voters intended is what was given. We polled all of these things, and something at about a 70% rate, Portlanders we polled said that they approve of and desire these changes. And also, most interestingly, about 68% of the poll return said that they want this thing to go back to the ballot to have a say in making sure that the system that was not created but was suggested is being implemented the way they intended.
I got a follow-up question. I don't think it should go back to the ballot, and that's because I have a fear that fear at times will stop people from even wanting a healthy accountability system. My follow-up question is a little bit of a challenge. You know I love you. We walk this down. We are able to argue. Imagine being able to sit with a formerly incarcerated black man and a white PPA president gets to arguing and loving and caring. Right, yeah, I do. Fancy mochas too. So I really love being able to engage. We've been able to shift and challenge each other in a lot of ways to really work towards true public safety. You talked about the thumb on the scale when it comes to the implication that certain folks coming should have these tragedies associated with them. I would also ask you, are we not at risk of the same thing if Portland, if folks who are family members, right? Is there not a risk of fear? Of protecting family also there as far as the scale goes.
Right, so look, I don't care who's on that league. Mm-hmm. All I care about is that they are just hearing the facts and rendering a verdict. Right. I don't care who, other than that's all I care about, right? And so from my perspective, that's possible, and those people shouldn't be on the board. Right. It's also possible that you have people, look, Terrence, you've had history, and I would love for you to be on that board. Right. And so it does not matter to me who you are or what your experience is. My just like any other jury, my thing is, can you hear the facts and render a verdict? And here's the thing that's interesting about accountability. Whether or not something is legal, whether or not a police officer is legally allowed to do something, and whether or not that action has a significant negative impact on the community, those two things can be true at once. And the challenge is a mature, logical, healthy city is at the same time having both of those conversations. Because if we fire police officers for doing things they're legally allowed to do, they will get their job back. But they will not be whole, and we will not be whole for them having gotten their job back, and that's the problem. However, if we say, this happened, why did it happen? What kind of training led to it happening? Who are we as a city, and what are our values, and how do we ensure that the actions that officer took, if they shouldn't happen again, they don't, and if they should or did happen, how do we help surround that family that was impacted, that community that was impacted, and ensure that we're not breaking that trust? It's all very complicated. But accountability, all too often, in my opinion, is about whacking somebody in the face with a 2x4 so we can say we did something. But it isn't that. It is a very complicated amalgam of truths that everyone's impacted by police violence differently. If someone is shot righteously, that family is forever changed. That police officer is forever changed. Our community is forever changed, just like when there's community violence. Very often we talk about violence in our community. It is a tragic truth that young men of color are significantly, disproportionately impacted by gun violence. And the real tragedy is that two families are broken when that happens, because the person who was involved, who was on a pathway to violence for whatever reason was going on, and the person who was shot, those families are rended apart. So community violence is hugely impactful. We've got to deal with both. How many times do we see cameras in the face of people, like school shooting? How do you feel about what your son just did today? Not great. Not good. That family's broken. And again, we just saw in Michigan that we have a family that participated and they go to prison. It's all bad, right? But we've got to navigate that together. So again, all the things I just said, right? You're right. we shouldn't, like my dad probably shouldn't sit on that accountability thing. He's a lifelong cop, and he kind of likes me a little bit. And so he shouldn't sit there. But again, the way it's written, if your great uncle was a security guard, can't be on there. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
This is how we talk all the time, y'all, for hours.
Can we not do ours?
No, I'm not gonna get back at him. I'm staying away. You get this round.
I just want to announce there's no tacos left if anyone's hungry.
We've got a question back here.
This might be a bit of a weird question, so I'll try to purpose it the best as I can. So I've lived in Portland my entire life. My family's been here for about 3 generations. And I always tell a different story. I have a different narrative with police accountability or police impact as well. So growing up, I remember I grew up on 13th and Killingsworth, and I'll never forget this. I was like 6, 7 years old. I come outside, and I see like a guy running down the street, right?
Yeah.
And I see a cop chasing him. And I'm like, oh, that's Officer J. I know his mom, his dad, his grandmother, his grandfather, where his kids go to school, where he goes to church, where he plays basketball, the team, so on and so on. I know this person, his life, right? Because he's actually integrated in our community.
Yeah.
So growing up, the police would come to our neighborhood, they would park the car right next to my house, and they would just walk the streets and go talk to people, right?
Yeah.
I remember there were like gang barbecues.
Yeah.
And the police would be there, and they'd be like, shirts and skins. Like, I really remember that, right? And so for me, as I was gentrified out of my neighborhood, I saw a shift in how policing happened as well in these neighborhoods. I saw that the people that were community members that were part of the police force were no longer in those communities. And so I don't know what that change was. So I'm just asking, and there's not a real answer, I don't think, but what happened in terms of how policing is done in Portland to where there is not community policing where they're involved?
Yeah.
And how do we get back to that?
Right. So, and again, like I said, I was a district officer out here. I mean, I have sat at a million kitchen tables and worked through all these different issues with each other. I mean, Terrence and I talked about how some of these families who have had gang violence, whatever else, tried to work with families. I honestly think the narrative around law enforcement has created a paralytic in the hearts and minds of people who wear a uniform. And I think a lot of people in the community are told a lot how they should feel about things, and it creates dissonance in their minds about, what should I do? How should I do it? How should I approach all this? We've been ripped apart by a million different things. Some of it's lived experience, some of it's real, right? Some people have experienced disproportion or bias-based policing, or they've had family members who have been unfairly treated. That's real too. But I know my cops. My dad was a cop in Northeast Portland with Z-Man, like all this stuff. I grew up in all this, and I'm kind of a weird bureau historian. I'm 42 years old almost, but I've been here for all of it. I think our city has to kind of decide who we want to be. And I mean, I listen to every city council meeting. It is awesome. It is the same 8 people every single time who show up and speak for you. And policy is made. That's why this, I think, will work hopefully better. Because it is amazing how, again, the othering of police and the changing of people's perspective around the human beings wearing the uniform created a brokenness. And for me, during 2020, I mean, I lost friends. It was hard. It was hard to have our community differented. And watching walls, I mean, I was down there. I got kicked out of school police because we got disbanded. And I was down there and watching walls raised around our police station. I grew up here. That can't be us, right? And it happened because of something tragic, because a black man was murdered in another place. And the thing that's difficult is we see things happen around the country. Portland actually is one of the most progressive and well-trained police organizations in the country. Full stop. I've traveled all over the country. But we also are imperfect. We've had people make mistakes and do things. But the challenge is we've not found the secret recipe for our community when they see things happening elsewhere, saying, that's bad. My cops don't do that. And that kind of connection happens from what you're describing. We lost our way, from my perspective, by a lot of politics and a bunch of bullshit. This is my personal opinion. Sorry for the words. That happens at a grassroots level. That happens from members of different communities at different kitchen tables, building those relationships and generationally growing. I went to Portugal for a while to look at some drug policy, but the one thing that was really interesting about Portugal is in 1975, they had a dictator, and people were getting like politically disappeared, right? Because that's what dictators do. And then in about 1985, they're like, nobody trusts the government. I wonder why. It's like, because you were politically disappearing people 10 years ago. Like, what do? School police. 260 school police officers, and they have a mascot, it's Falco the Falcon. Sign me up. That sounds like a cool job. But they realized that the only way to really start building relationships was with our young people in the next generation, and also working on healing the current generation. They did that too. They started having police officers that did elder care, that if you needed someone to go sit with grandma, you could call a number and a police officer in uniform would go sit with them and talk to them. They did domestic violence education, drug education, because they were legalizing drugs, all the things. And it was through that community connection with the government, through the police, that they built something different. It worked there. I think a big reason that Measure 110, aside from parts of it really just a bad idea, but a big part of the issue was the lack of connection between the first responders and all the service providers. There's a wall there. Yep. So all that to say, you're right. And again, it's interesting because people look at the history of the Portland Police Bureau and say, man, that was real bad. But there were parts that were real good. Right. And we need to make sure that we're leaning on the parts that are good, identifying the connections, building those relationships at a grassroots level, and not dividing our people who wish to serve from the people who need to be served.
My last comment, because I appreciate you saying that, my last comment, I'll shut up, is that, growing up, there's two things that I also remember, same thing with the police coming to the neighborhoods, there was that connection with you. You come by, you get a sticker from a police officer, that was the shit, you know what I'm saying? That was great. But there was also when there were times of tragedy in our community where it would be a police officer that would knock on the door, right? Yeah. And people would answer. And they would say, hey, look, I know that this person caused harm and they caused violence. I know there was a life loss or there was a tragic event, right? We have to go get this person because they caused harm. Yeah. We also have to ensure that they get to the jail properly, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, what I remember, and there's always this no snitching narrative, which was like, okay, well, we trust this officer. We know what's happening. We know where this person may be. And they would go get that person. And they would take him, to jail or whatever, but they would make it there safely. Yeah. And I miss that, Portland. Yeah. And I do recognize that there are a lot of officers that are doing well that have been beat down by a narrative that is just, it doesn't really exist in our city. So I just want to say I recognize that. Thank you for being very transparent.
Yeah. So and to that point, relationship is the magic potion for navigating community safety issues. In 2020, the things that were cut from the Portland Police Bureau, school police, our gun violence team, and our TriMet division. Now, there were significant concerns that people expressed about the disproportionate nature of the policing that was being done, but the problem is it was all being done in relationship. Those groups knew who grandma was, knew who mom was. Hey, I saw this dude riding with this guy, we just had this thing, look, just tell us where he's at, call him up, let's figure this out. The multidisciplinary approach to police work, when we're using CBOs, we're using, again, in the school police model, I would go and sit down with counselors and teachers and moms and dads and all the people, and we would sit down and you casework that kiddo and say, hey, this kid is on this pathway. How do we divert him from the criminal justice system? That's the model, but it requires relationship and trust. And it was broken, I will tell you until I'm dead, that I believe it was on purpose, because I think there were people in elected office that wanted to break that. What we needed to do was pivot to something like FIT and get more community engagement in those things to ensure there was trust. Because again, even if we're doing something right, if people don't know it, if they don't know what it is, if they don't believe it, you might as well not do it at all. It was there, we just weren't communicating well enough. Police have, for the entirety of my existence, and again, I grew up with a cop in North Portland as a dad. I grew up over by Rose City Park golf course. Police have been a castle on the hill for far too long. We would ride our horses down into the dark and scary thing. Fear not the darkness coming, for tonight we ride to meet it. And we would break a bunch of stuff, and we'd do some stuff, and then off we go. And then you're like, have fun. Can't do that. We need to talk about what happened. We need to talk. When we had a recent officer-involved shooting, I'm just pointing at you, sitting there, sorry.
Not that that's going to happen.
We had an officer-involved shooting, and again, what happened, the facts are not in dispute. Person pointing a gun at a police officer after robbing something. That is a dangerous thing to do, and we have to navigate that. But I had a bunch of people from Terrence and some other black elders reached out to me and the chief and the DA and said, how can we help heal our community if you won't tell us what happened? And I'm like, I don't get to message stuff very much because I know things I'm supposed to know it, but I'm not supposed to say it. But that worked. When we start getting body cameras, when what's his name? The gentleman in Memphis who was murdered. He was murdered by 5 police officers. Worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I broke. The first thing I did was I coordinated every single union president in the state for law enforcement to release a statement saying, that is not us. That's real bad. But then what they did, what was really frustrating to me, is they said, this video is really bad. We're going to release it in 2 weeks. And then so for 2 weeks, it was just bedlam because everyone's getting anxious. We've just got to be transparent. We've got to talk about what happened. If something good happened, good's the wrong word. If something legal happens, but it's hard to watch, provide the clarity about what happened. If something bad happened, reach out to your community who's trusted, your community leaders, and say, this is what we have, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to talk about it. You got to talk about it. Transparency is the biggest thing that law enforcement as a culture has been missing.
Yeah, my mom was a police officer, so thank you, sir.
Thank you for hers.
I got a question. What was the latest on the body cameras, though, about writing the report?
Right, so here's the biggest issue with body cameras scientifically, okay? So, and again, I will go as quickly as I can. Video is not what an officer perceives. The standard, legally, for when an officer engages in force is what would a reasonable police officer do based on the totality of the circumstances, without the benefit of hindsight, based on the perceptions of the officer engaging in the conduct, right? You gotta, like, what did you see? A camera's sitting right here, and it sees a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't see, but may have questions that you need to answer, right? And so what almost every agency in the country does is it allows police officers to review the camera to ensure you're touching on everything, you're covering everything, that you're explaining all the things you need to explain. The big delineating factor is with deadly force. About 99% of agencies allow their officers to utilize that camera for everything, and except for deadly force, about 50% of agencies allow it for everything. It's interesting, Gresham allows it for everything, but many of their officers have told me they would like not to watch a video if they're involved in a deadly force incident. It's significantly traumatic.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, they're like, I don't need it. I just will tell you what happened. So that was the conversation. The frustrating, it got very political. We actually had an agreement like 6 years ago on body cameras, and then it got uprooted because of money. This conversation was far less interesting than it became politically, because it really just became, will the DOJ sign off, and then where are we at? So at the end of the day, my desire is for my officers to have all the evidence available to make sure they're providing the most comprehensive and complete statement up front, instead of having to write a bunch of reports after the fact, or you ending in this weird, like, well, but here you said this, but now you've watched the camera and you said that. It was left hand versus right hand. Those things aren't legally relevant, but they become very difficult from a transparency standpoint.
So bottom line is, on a deadly force thing, it's turned, I mean, they don't get to watch it.
So there's a lot of force science. So what's going to happen is the officer will give a statement about their observations about what happened, and then they'll go watch the video, and then they'll then finish the interview answering any new questions that might arise having watched it. There is a lot of science about video and recognition and recog and all that stuff. We just want to get it right.
But you will do the
There's an interview up front. You will give a statement about your observations about the call, what actions you took, why you took them, and then lawyers.
Aaron, how do we get back to what he's talking about with the community policing? I think it's incredibly important and understated. Can you do that with the amount of officers you have now, or is that one of the biggest factors in getting
So that takes time. That takes availability. Our officers are available something in the range of about 10% of their day. That should be about 60%. So at the end of the day, again, the PSR conversation is very complicated. But there's a lot of work that law enforcement does that isn't police work. And it isn't that we shouldn't be a vector to or participate in that work. Law enforcement has a lot of interactions with people who are suffering from addiction, a lot of interactions with people who are suffering from mental illness. And there's a lot of kind of crossroads with those two things that sometimes eke into law enforcement, sometimes they don't. We need very, very quick access to service providers. My big frustration with Measure 110 is police were, at the origin of that bill, set up as we need to move away from disproportionate and concerning policing around people, within the addiction as a healthcare issue type thing. But we then also made police the vector still to provide these tickets, which had no teeth, which created a problem. When a police officer is interacting with someone who's suffering from addiction, they need to be able to call a peer, a service provider, someone and say, hey, this person right here is not engaging in criminal conduct. However, they're in need of help. They're asking for care, and everyone who works in the addiction world knows that if someone's asking for help, you got to get it now. And if we had that kind of access, if those partnerships exist, and we didn't have people saying, I don't want to work with law enforcement, but instead they were saying, I'm the bulwark against the predations of law enforcement. I will show up right now and get you where you need to go, so you don't even have to deal with those guys. I'm good with that. If PSR could transport, if PSR could be a mobile service provider instead of a mobile service suggester, I think we can start peeling off, because again, getting someone help that endures lowers the call volume significantly. When we're talking about tents and other things, a tent is a safer place to be, but it's not housing in the general sense that endures. So again, our focus should be every time the government has an interaction with somebody who's seeking help, that we get them into help that lasts more than 12 hours, that we get them into help that really endures. Because the call recidivism for law enforcement is the biggest challenge to free time to go and hang out and play with kids.
And that's the same thing that I think we all want for the homeless community, to be in a place where they've got services, they've got the help they need, not randomly spread out the city. Makes no sense.
Well, the impact of houselessness in different places in the city is different, right? I mean, that's the thing. So East Portland, it's really gotten to an acute place. For my career, homelessness manifested itself in one of two ways: Springwater corridor, or in houses that have become kind of adrift in the sea of houses. You didn't have a lot of block camping the way you see now, but it's because all those things have kind of just filled up. We have an acute crisis of all the things, of housing, addiction services, mental health care, all this stuff. And so it's manifesting itself. Honestly, that's why I think it's so hard out here, is that you're starting to see downtown level issue without the services. And so that becomes the problem, is it's really, really, really difficult. I think if we can start, again, getting the number down, if everyone who wants treatment for addiction was given a bed, that problem, let's say it reduces by 30%. A lot more manageable, right? You start everyone who is standing there saying, I will take your help. You make sure all your services are aligned to get the people asking for the services, get it in there. And then you start now navigating, because in my opinion, police really should only be used to navigate service refusers in those spaces when you're getting calls. We really shouldn't be the social service arm of the government. It's just we're not properly situated.
Well, I've been sitting here and I've been listening to this, and I got my opinion on this. Everybody's saying we've got a drug problem, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how come every time a little store closes down, you get a marijuana store up? Woo! The more you get, the more they get. Well, naturally, how are you going to control drugs if you keep building buildings for them?
Yeah, the marijuana thing is actually pretty interesting, because there's such a significant influx that the market's actually crumbling. There's actually more marijuana in Oregon than any state in the nation. Eastern Oregon apparently is really good for growing.
It is.
You're right, but again, I think the city needs to ensure that it's doing everything that it can to support small business, that businesses that can grow and be healthy in communities, that those conversations are being had.
You don't want to start a drug house, for crying out loud. That doesn't help the community.
It does not.
And I think, okay, now your permits. Okay, how come you're permitting these places to go? The only thing that I see in these drug places is the city's making a heck of a lot of money. Because they're getting money off of the drugs that are sold in these places.
I was just gonna say, no, I know you're talking about housing. I'll just challenge one thing. I think when we're talking about the impact of drug use, it is not the same as when we're talking about maybe a disproportionate amount of liquor stores and weed stores in poor and disenfranchised communities. I think that's one thing. I don't think the weed thing and like crystal meth and heroin is playing impactfully in the same way. So when I look at that, I grew up in the projects in Chicago, right? And I know that when there's a lot of there's generally a lot of liquor places and check cashing places in poor communities, and that hurts poor communities. But I think when we're talking about drugs, we're more or less, listen, the person that's going to get them a little edible is not impacting us the same way that you know, that people in my family have struggled with addiction. So I understand from why is that so heavy in our communities. I think because we also don't have a city council that's looking at if there's a negative impact on that in our community, and we need leaders who you can say, show us the numbers. Is it helping or is it harming? And is there a pathway, right, from that to crystal meth addiction?
Well, see, the thing is, I live in the Woodstock area. I'm not in District 1, but anyway, now like on Woodstock, you're from 52nd East, there's 3 places that sell 52nd and Holgate. There was a store there. They took that out and put in weed. You know,
they like the weed, man.
Where does your drug addiction come from?
I don't know if it's. Listen, I'm not a drug specialist. I just come from addict parents. You know what's interesting is the numbers actually. We are not actually worse off in drug use historically than we've been. People don't even know that. It's just in your face in houseless camps and stuff like that. We don't actually have more addicts, y'all. Y'all gotta hear this. We actually don't have more addicts than we had 3 years ago. We have more houseless folks that it is impacting our lives and our visual more. So we see the impact. Most addicts actually do drugs at home. Right? Most folks, tents don't represent the extremity of addiction.
If I may.
Yeah, we can argue if you don't agree.
I mean, I think that fentanyl is a different.
It's a different monster.
A bed.
Yeah.
A bed for one. Like fentanyl is a complete. Like you can't count beds the same, right?
No,
because it is not a couple days.
It's the worst thing.
It is months, right?
Fentanyl killing, and this is when we talk about a drug crisis or fentanyl. We're talking about death. We're not talking about necessarily an increase in addiction again, because you're correct. We're talking about the impact of addiction. This is why fentanyl is so dangerous for our communities, because we're burying people from that usage, and it's cheaper and it's synthetic. So you don't got to wait for a plant to grow to get it, right? There's no long process, and it's murderous. And it is actually increasing the impact of because the addiction is so tough on folks, it does cause people, I think, to do even more extreme than what we've seen with heroin and crack cocaine historically. Fentanyl is not to be compared. And so when we talk about care, when we talk about houselessness, we recognize that that's a portion of it. It's fentanyl, but it's not all. Affordability is a portion of it, right? Immigrants coming in and needing shelter. That's why I said if we're truly a shelter type of community, we have to. Listen, I said this to a friend of mine the other day. We somehow kept building weed stores even though we didn't tax it federally, but we're not making paths for folks to work in our community because we say federally they can't. Now, if we want to argue about something, I'm curious about how we can tax a weed store, but we can't get folks working when they come in our community. So I think there's some stuff we need to argue about, and that weed store can be an example of how when we want to tax it and make enough money, we seem to find roads. We need to find those same roads for people that's coming into our community, because I assure y'all, most folks that's coming here for the American dream does not want to live in a tent or a car or be complicated. They want access. They want to be able to work. They want to be able to provide. So I want to argue with fellow council folks about how do we create paths for employment for folks that suffer in our community. You can hand out 1 million tents, you can build 1 million camps. People have to be able to work and build dignity for themselves and self-sustain. We give a hand up, but eventually people want to stand on their own. So let's argue about the weed stores, about how we get folks working even though the feds can't tax weed. Well, I don't know, for the record, I don't know, no, I'm just,
One of the issues with if you don't believe there should be weed stores everywhere, and then therefore the city of Portland shouldn't permit them, is that the city of Portland's ability to permit or not permit what are legal businesses according to the state of Oregon is limited. So, much like Portland has more strip clubs per capita than any city in the United States because the First Amendment, or not the First Amendment, but the free speech provision of the Oregon Constitution, they've decided protects that. And so you cannot regulate strip clubs any differently than you would regulate any other establishment that serves alcohol, right? You run into the same enforcement or issue or permitting issue with marijuana dispensaries. Is the city of Portland is approached by someone who wants to open and operate a business that the state of Oregon has said is a legal business, and that limits the ability of the state of Oregon to deny a permit for that business, and which seems to a degree like passing the buck. But the city council, the city of Portland, is a subdivision of the state of Oregon and has to abide by the laws of the state of Oregon. And so if the state of Oregon says this is a legal business, then
can't you change that?
I think you can. I think you can. In the public health world, this is called alcohol outlet density, of like the density of alcohol outlets in a particular place. And in other cities, local governments, again, using the tools of local government, not state, they can regulate through their zoning code about this is an area that has too much, and the city's making the decision, no more. And we need to be able to focus on other things, like increasing our tree canopy. One thing the city of Chicago is doing is exploring a municipally run grocery store. They're exploring it, but these ideas, especially in areas like East Portland where there is a food desert and we're having challenges with access to food and things like that. So I think zoning is one tool in this toolbox, and something I've said earlier, zoning equity, that we can't just dump everything in East Portland. Like, all of these things have to be dispersed across the city, and with this new form of government, we will finally have people who are accountable to do that.
Smarter people.
I know, right?
It's up to you guys.
Is that it?
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much.
Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you for all attending.
I know.